It is 3 in the morning and your hand reaches for the phone before you even realize what you are doing. The blue light burns your eyes. You scroll past posts you saw hours ago. Check messages that are not there. Refresh feeds that have not changed. Tomorrow, you will feel exhausted. You know this. Yet here you are again. You have tried everything. Deleted social media apps only to reinstall them the next day. Set screen time limits you override without thinking. Made promises to yourself you break before noon. The harder you fight, the stronger the craving becomes. Each failure makes you feel weaker. You tell yourself you lack discipline, that something is broken inside you that needs to be fixed. But what if you have been approaching this backwards the whole time? There was once a monk named Zheng who lived in a mountain temple during the Song dynasty. He became obsessed with collecting sacred texts. Every visiting merchant, every traveling scholar, every pilgrim who passed through brought news of rare scriptures hidden in distant monasteries. Zheng would travel for weeks to acquire them. His small room overflowed with scrolls stacked to the ceiling. He had more texts than he could read in 3 lifetimes. At night, unable to sleep, he would light a candle and unroll just one more scroll, then another. The characters blurred together. His eyes burned. His hands shook from exhaustion. The very texts meant to guide him toward wisdom had become the thing blocking his path. He was collecting scriptures the way a drowning man clutches stones, mistaking weight for substance. One evening, his teacher found him surrounded by towers of paper, eyes hollow and red. But here is where the story takes an unexpected turn. The teacher did not lecture him about moderation. He did not tell Zheng to burn the scrolls or lock them away. He did not speak about willpower or discipline at all. Instead, he sat down beside Zheng and asked a question so simple it seemed meaningless. When you grip the scroll this tightly, can you actually see what is written? Zheng looked down at his hands. His fingers were clenched so hard around the paper that the text wrinkled and buckled. The characters he was trying to read were completely obscured by his own desperate grip. The river does not fight the rock, his teacher said quietly. It simply finds another way. You are fighting yourself, and in this war, everyone loses. That night, something shifted. Zheng's problem was not that he loved the scrolls too much. His problem was that he was trying to possess them. The tighter he clenched, the less he could see. The more he tried to control his craving, the more it controlled him. His teacher understood something we have forgotten. Freedom does not come through force. It comes through learning to hold things differently. Why digital detox fails. We approach phone addiction exactly like Zheng approached his scrolls. We see the phone as an enemy that must be defeated. On Sunday night, we make the decision. Tomorrow will be different. We delete Instagram, Facebook, TikTok. We announce to friends we are going on a digital detox. We feel strong. We feel in control. By Tuesday afternoon, we have reinstalled everything. This pattern repeats so often, we stop counting. The cycle becomes familiar. Promise, delete, resist, fail, shame, repeat. Each time we break our promise, the shame grows heavier. Each failure proves what we secretly fear. We are weak. We lack discipline. Something is wrong with us that needs to be fixed. But here is what nobody tells you. This approach was designed to fail from the beginning. When you declare war on your phone habit, you create 2 parts inside yourself. One part becomes the strict parent setting rules and restrictions. The other part becomes the rebellious child who resists being controlled. These 2 parts fight each other while you stand in the middle, exhausted from their battle. You are spending enormous energy fighting yourself. And in this kind of war, both sides lose because they are both you. The ancient Daoists noticed this pattern centuries before smartphones existed. They watched people fight their own nature and saw how the struggle itself created more suffering. They understood something crucial. When you push hard against anything, it pushes back with equal force. Try to hold your breath, and your body screams for air. Try to force yourself to sleep, and sleep runs away. Try to stop thinking about something, and you cannot think about anything else. This is not a flaw in your willpower. This is how the mind works. The Daoists had a name for this understanding. They called it Wu Wei, which means something like effortless action or non-forcing. But the English translation misses something important. Wu Wei does not mean doing nothing. It means learning to work with the natural grain of reality instead of against it. Think about water for a moment. When water meets a boulder in its path, it does not crash into it repeatedly, trying to break through. It does not make promises to itself about moving the boulder by sheer force of will. Water simply flows around the obstacle. Not because it is weak, but because it understands something about the nature of reality. Forcing creates resistance. Flowing creates change. Your phone habit is the boulder. Fighting it is crashing against stone. What you need is to learn to flow. Touch. The ancient secret, hidden in plain sight. In the 4th century BCE, during China's Warring States period, philosophers were obsessed with a single question. How do you accomplish great things without exhausting yourself? How do you govern nations, build legacies, and master difficult skills while remaining at peace? The answer they found seemed to contradict everything people believed about achievement. They discovered that true power comes not from adding more effort, but from removing unnecessary resistance. This principle became known as Wu Wei, written as Wu Wei in Chinese characters. The first character means without or non. The second means action or doing. Together, they create a paradox that Western translation struggles to capture. Wu Wei is often translated as non-action or non-doing. This sounds like laziness or passivity. It sounds like giving up, but that translation is backwards. Wu Wei actually means something closer to actionless action or effortless doing. It describes the state of being so perfectly aligned with what you are doing that effort becomes unnecessary. Think of a master swordsman whose blade moves without thought, a skilled musician whose fingers find the right notes without searching, a fluent speaker whose words flow without forcing. This is Wu Wei. Not the absence of action, but action that has become so natural it feels effortless. The Daoist text, Dao De Jing, written around 300 BCE, puts it this way: the way never acts, yet nothing is left undone. This seems impossible. How can you accomplish everything by not acting? Here's what it means. When you align yourself with the natural flow of reality, with the way that things actually work, you stop wasting energy on resistance. You stop forcing what cannot be forced. You stop fighting battles that create more problems than they solve. What remains is only the action that serves, the effort that builds rather than burns. Wu Wei does not mean surrender. It means learning which battles are real and which battles you are inventing. It means understanding that your phone addiction is not an enemy to crush. It is a pattern that formed for specific reasons and can dissolve when those reasons change. There is another concept that pairs with Wu Wei. The Daoists called it Zheng, written as Zheng, which means non-contention or not competing. Zheng teaches that some problems cannot be solved by fighting them. When you stop competing with your own desires, when you stop treating your cravings as opponents in a war, something remarkable happens. The thing you were fighting begins to lose its power, not because you defeated it, but because you stopped feeding it with resistance. Ancient texts describe Zheng this way: the sage does not compete, yet no one can compete with him. By refusing to enter the battle, the sage wins without fighting. This is not word games or mysticism. This is describing something real about how the mind works. When you fight your urge to check your phone, you keep your mind focused on the phone. When you obsess about not scrolling, you cannot stop thinking about scrolling. The battle itself becomes a chain that binds you to the thing you are trying to escape. But when you stop fighting, when you simply observe the craving without acting on it, something shifts. The craving becomes just a feeling that arises and passes like all feelings. It stops being an enemy that controls you and becomes just weather moving through your inner landscape. The nature of wanting. Here is something you need to understand about cravings. They lie to you about their own nature. When the urge to check your phone arrives, it feels permanent. It feels like it will keep growing stronger until you give in. Your mind tells you that the only way to relieve this pressure is to scroll. This feeling is so convincing that you believe it completely. But the feeling is wrong. A researcher named Zheng, who lived over 2,000 years ago, described this perfectly. He told a story about a man who was terrified of his own shadow. The man ran faster and faster trying to escape it. The more he ran, the more exhausted he became. His shadow kept pace with him, no matter how fast he moved. Finally, collapsing from exhaustion, he stopped running. He sat down under a tree, and the shadow disappeared in the shade. The urge to check your phone is like the shadow. The more you run from it, the more it chases you. The more you fight it, the larger it grows. But if you stop running, if you simply sit with the feeling, something unexpected happens. The urge peaks, then fades, then passes away entirely, like a wave that builds and crashes and dissolves back into calm water. Most cravings last between 3 and 5 minutes at their strongest. This is not theory. This is measurable biological reality. Your brain releases chemicals that create the feeling of urgency. These chemicals spike, then naturally decline. If you can sit through those 3 to 5 minutes without acting, the craving passes on its own. It does not need to be satisfied. It does not need to be fought. It just needs to be felt and allowed to pass. Chen discovered this truth the night his teacher asked about his grip on the scrolls. When the urge came to unroll another text, instead of giving in or trying to distract himself, he simply noticed it. He felt the pull in his chest. He observed the thoughts telling him that reading would bring relief. He sat with the discomfort of not immediately acting, and then something remarkable happened. After a few minutes, the urge faded. It did not disappear because he defeated it. It faded because that is what urges naturally do when you stop feeding them with attention and resistance. This is the first principle of Wu Wei applied to habits. You do not fight the craving. You make space for it. You notice it without immediately reacting to it. The moment between the urge and the action is where freedom lives. Most people never experience this moment because they move so quickly from wanting to doing that, the space never opens. Well, stop competing with yourself. Most people who struggle with phone addiction spend enormous energy hating themselves for it. They check their phone, then immediately feel shame. This shame creates stress. Stress demands relief. Relief is often found through distraction. And the easiest distraction is checking the phone again. The cycle locks into place. They are trapped in a battle with themselves where both sides lose. This internal soul. War is what the Daoists called Zheng, which means contention or competition. When you practice Buzheng, you stop this war. You stop treating yourself as an opponent who needs to be defeated. Here's what this looks like in practice. A woman named Lynn struggled with phone addiction for 8 years. She tried every app that promised to lock her out after time limits. She would find ways around every barrier within days. One Sunday, she deleted all social media in a dramatic show of control. By Tuesday, she had reinstalled everything. Each failure made her feel more broken, more hopeless. Then something unexpected happened. A friend told her about an approach that seemed too simple to work. Instead of trying to stop herself from reaching for her phone, Lynn tried something different. When her hand moved toward the phone, she would pause and ask herself one simple question. What am I actually looking for right now? At first, the answer seemed obvious. She was looking at her phone. But when she paid closer attention, something shifted. Sometimes the answer was, I am looking for a break from this boring task. Sometimes it was, I am looking for proof that I matter to someone. Sometimes it was, I am trying to escape feeling lonely. Once she understood what she was actually seeking, she could address the real need. If she needed a break, she could take one without the phone. If she needed connection, she could text a specific friend instead of scrolling through feeds. If she was lonely, she could acknowledge that feeling instead of covering it with distraction. Within 3 months, her phone use dropped by more than half. Not because she forced herself to stop, because she stopped needing the phone to solve problems it was never meant to solve. This is Zheng in action. You are not trying to defeat the habit. You are trying to understand what the habit is protecting or providing. Every habit, even destructive ones, began as a solution to some problem. The person who reaches for their phone during awkward silences once found relief there. The person who scrolls before bed once found an escape from racing thoughts. The habit worked, at least temporarily. Now it no longer serves, but the pattern remains. When you stop competing with the habit and start understanding it, you can address the real need directly. The habit weakens on its own because it is no longer necessary. This is not about willpower. This is about wisdom. The power of small spaces. The Daoist approach does not rely on rules or punishments. Rules trigger resistance. The moment you tell yourself you absolutely cannot check your phone before noon, your mind begins counting down to noon. You spend your entire morning thinking about the phone you are not allowed to touch. This is not freedom. This is just imprisonment with extra steps. Instead of creating rules, you create space. Space between the urge and the action. Space for awareness to enter. A businessman named Wu Wei discovered this by accident. He did not delete apps or set restrictions. He simply moved his phone to a shelf in another room when he got home from work. Not hidden in a locked drawer where it felt forbidden. Just placed somewhere that required him to stand up and walk a few steps to reach it. This tiny change created something profound. When the urge came to check his phone, he had to physically move. That movement interrupted the automatic pattern. Often, by the time he stood up and walked to where the phone sat, he realized he did not actually need it. The urge had already passed. The space between wanting and doing had allowed consciousness to wake up. Here's what most people do not understand about habits. They are automated sequences that run without thought. Your hand reaches for the phone before your conscious mind even knows what is happening. The action and the urge are fused together into one seamless movement. There is no gap, no pause, no moment where choice enters. When you introduce even the smallest friction between urge and action, you create that gap. That gap is everything. In that space, awareness can ask, do I actually need this right now? In that space, you can feel the craving build and watch it naturally decline. In that space, you remember you have choices. You can create space in many ways, and none of them require force. Remove social media apps from your home screen so you must search for them. This adds 5 seconds of friction. Those 5 seconds are enough to wake up. Turn off all notifications so the phone stops demanding your attention. Place your phone somewhere that requires deliberate effort to reach, not somewhere that feels punishing. Just somewhere that breaks the automatic pattern. These are not barriers meant to keep you out. These are invitation for consciousness to enter. When checking your phone requires even one small conscious choice, you begin to see how often you are reaching for it without any choice at all. The way water shapes stone. Laozi, who wrote the Tao Te Ching around 300 BCE, observed something about nature that most people miss. The softest things in the world overcome the hardest. Water wears away stone, not through force, but through patient, persistent contact. The stone seems immovable. The water seems powerless. Yet over time, the water always wins. Not by smashing against the stone, but by flowing around it, through it, slowly reshaping what seemed permanent. This principle works the same way with changing habits. Gentle, consistent distance works better than dramatic rejection. A teacher named Mei spent 7 years trapped in late-night phone scrolling. She would promise herself she would put the phone away by 10, then find herself still scrolling at midnight, eyes burning, knowing she would hate herself in the morning. She tried putting the phone in another room, but would simply get up and retrieve it. The force of her habit was stronger than the force of her rules. Then she changed her approach in a way that seemed almost too small to matter. She did not forbid herself from using the phone at night. She simply introduced one tiny practice. When she picked up the phone after 9, she would take 3 slow breaths before unlocking the screen. That was the only rule, 3 breaths. At first, she still scrolled for hours, but those 3 breaths created something, a tiny moment of awareness. Sometimes during those breaths, she would realize she was not even enjoying what she was about to do. She was just escaping discomfort. Sometimes she would notice how her body felt heavy and tense, not relaxed. Sometimes she would recognize that she was trying to avoid the silence of her own thoughts. Over weeks, that small moment of awareness began to change everything. She started noticing more clearly how the scrolling made her feel. Not energized, not connected, just numb and hollow. This was not judgment. This was simply seeing clearly. And seeing clearly, over time, naturally led to different choices. After 2 months, she was putting the phone down earlier. After 4 months, some nights she chose not to pick it up at all. Not because she forced herself, because she genuinely preferred the feeling of stillness. This is the power of gentle distance. You are not fighting. You are cultivating awareness. You are giving yourself small opportunities to see what is actually happening, instead of staying lost in the automatic pattern. And awareness, once it grows strong enough, changes everything, without force. The real freedom. The phone is not your enemy. The apps are not evil forces trying to control you. They are tools that have been overused because they met certain needs and created certain pleasures that felt easier than dealing with what was actually happening. The Daoist way is not to demonize them, but to find proper relationship with them. Use them when they genuinely serve. Put them down when they do not. Zheng eventually found peace with his scrolls. He did not burn them all in a dramatic gesture of renunciation. He kept a small collection of texts he truly valued and let the rest go. He learned to read with presence rather than hunger. The scrolls stopped being something to possess and became something to appreciate. His relationship with them changed because his inner relationship with himself changed. He stopped trying to fill an emptiness through collecting and started addressing the emptiness directly. But here's the twist that changes everything. The real problem was never the scrolls. The real problem was that Zheng was using the scrolls to avoid facing something he did not want to see. He was lonely. He was uncertain of his path. He was afraid that after all his years of study, he still did not understand the way. The scrolls gave him something to do with that fear besides feel it. Your phone works the same way. It is not the source of the problem. It is what you are using to avoid feeling something underneath. Maybe loneliness. Maybe anxiety about the future. Maybe the uncomfortable truth that you are not living the life you actually want. Maybe just the ordinary discomfort of being alone with your thoughts in a quiet room. The Daoist path asks you to look at what you are actually avoiding, not to judge it, not to fix it immediately, just to see it clearly. When you see what is actually happening, when you stop using the phone to cover uncomfortable truths, something remarkable occurs. The compulsion begins to loosen its grip. Not because you defeated it, because you understood it. This is why approaches based on force fail. They address the symptom but never touch the source. You can lock yourself out of every app, throw your phone in a drawer, and promise never to scroll again. But if you have not addressed what you are using the phone to avoid, the craving will simply shift to something else. Food, television, work, shopping, anything that lets you avoid the underlying discomfort. The sages did not seek to control every aspect of their lives through rigid discipline. They sought to align themselves with reality as it actually is. The phone will not disappear from your life, but your relationship with it can transform completely. Not through battle, through understanding. Not through force, through awareness. Here is how you can begin walking this path today. 1. Place your phone somewhere that requires you to stand and walk to reach it. Not hidden, just slightly inconvenient. 2. When you feel the urge to check your phone, take 3 slow breaths before picking it up. Use those breaths to notice what you are actually seeking. 3. Remove one app from your home screen that you check compulsively. Make it one step harder to access. 4. Set one time each day, even just 10 minutes, when you leave your phone in another room and do something with your full presence. 5. When you catch yourself scrolling mindlessly, do not judge yourself. Simply notice, set the phone down, and return to what matters. Most importantly, ask yourself the question that changes everything. What am I actually trying to avoid by reaching for this phone right now? The answer will tell you more than any app restriction or time limit ever could. Remember that true change does not come from fighting yourself. It comes from understanding yourself. The craving to check your phone is not a flaw to eliminate. It is information about what you need. Learn to read that information clearly, and the path forward reveals itself. Write in the comments, I choose awareness over force. Thank you for watching.